What's a real thing that you always thought was fake when you were younger? I used to think people only died if they were murdered, did it themselves. I was 7, maybe 8 when I found out one day my grandparents would die of old age, and I cried for a long time. I thought people just lived forever until they got murdered. That's hilarious and a bit sad. Hippos being dangerous. There's a ride at Disneyland called the Jungle Cruise, where you go through jungle scenes in a boat and the skipper tells jokes about the audio animatronic animals. In the bit with the hippos, they'll say the hippos are going to rush the boat and then shoot a cap gun to scare them off. As a kid I thought this was another joke, because obviously hippos can't hurt you, right? I was in my 20s before I found out the truth, which is that hippos will frick you up. They don't look it, but they're the deadliest large land mammal, and kill about 500 people a year. I wouldn't want to be in range of one. So when I was 8 my dad and I watched Star Trek IV, The Voyage Home. I didn't really get the time travel part of the plot, so I spent many years convinced that humpback whales were extinct. That snowflakes actually look the way they are portrayed. I grew up in a temperate area with no snow, and just kind of assumed that snowflakes were just balls of frozen water and the intricate designs were just artistic interpretation, like stars don't really have 5 points. It wasn't until I moved to the East Coast for college and a snowflake landed on me and I got to look at it up close that I realized each snowflake was actually beautiful and unique. I live in Wisconsin and own a couple of black wool coats. Usually snowflakes don't melt right away when they land on the wool, and the intricate patterns really stand out against the black. I love it, they are so beautiful. I don't know if this counts, but I always thought that O'Reilly's Auto Parts was a restaurant. I'd begged my dad to eat there. He eventually caved and took me to the auto store, and I told him that he warned them that I was coming and had them change the whole restaurant to an auto parts store just to mess with me. It's got auto parts right in the title. I thought measles and mumps were made up diseases when I was younger. I had never heard of anyone that had them. My sole knowledge of them was from the Shel Silverstein poem I Have the Measles and the Mumps, a gash, a rash and purple bumps. I had always wondered why I never got interesting sicknesses when I was a kid. Just colds and maybe a flu every now and then. I realize now that was all very much on purpose. I'm from Norway and someone convinced me that the indigenous people from the northern parts called Sami were a mythological people. It took years and a Sami classmate for me to realize they are real. I'm an English teacher in Vietnam and there was a section in my students' course book about the Sami people. I'm not sure why though. Seems like very random group of people for a Vietnamese child to learn about. So now, there are kids in Vietnam who know that the Sami people really like reindeer and their meat. I saw so many fake palm trees as a kid growing up in New England. Now I go to school in California and I still catch myself assuming the palms are fake. Even better is when those palm trees are decorated with lights. There is a casino here that does pink up the tree and whiten the leaves. When my daughter asked what kind of tree they were, I had a very hard time not saying penis trees because that's all I can think of them as now. So when I found out about Father Christmas I thought that meant reindeer weren't real. It was only when I thought my boyfriend was taking the mick at the zoo saying let's go and see the reindeer that I found out the real truth. Wait until you find out about elves. When I was a child, I had no idea that people lived in big cities. I thought they were just where people worked and people attended professional sporting events, and that they were just empty at night. Well, downtown Cleveland is like that. Not me, but my grandmother. When I was younger and desperately wanted to be a paleontologist, she always looked at me like she thought I was nuts. A couple of years ago, it turned out that she thought dinosaurs weren't real and were something that were made up for TV shows, like that Pokemon thing. It took until I was 12 to be taken seriously when I said I want to be a paleontologist, because my grandma also thought dinosaurs were made up, like dragons, and to be fair, I was almost as obsessed with dragons. I just didn't say I wanted to study those dragons for a job. Currently I want to work on tiny mammals because my thesis is pretty awesome. Not me, and I'm probably late to this, but I moved to Key West and am now dating a girl who grew up there. For those not familiar, Key West is a 6 square mile island 90 miles south of Miami, so agriculture is literally non-existent there. She told me a story about her younger brother, who when he was about 5-6 years old went on a road trip up to Orlando with the family. They passed a field and he was looking out the window and saw a field full of cows. He looks up at his mom and in disbelief says cows are real. He legit though cows were like unicorns, made up creatures. My husband just admitted to me that he didn't know cows had fur. He thought they were leathery. He is also a Floridian. They need better petting zoos. Sonic, the fast food restaurant. My reasoning was that I had never seen one around where I live, and the background of the commercials weren't recognizable areas. I was stupid as heck. I didn't know that Carl's Jr. and Hardee's were the same chain. When I first saw Hardee's I was like wow, Carl's Jr. could sue the crap out of them. They use the same star logo and everything. Totally thought Transylvania was a made up place for years. Vampires are pretend, and they come from Transylvania, so it was logical that the place they came from wasn't real. I used to think that Pennsylvanians were living fast and loose with their vampire risk level. 7/11s specifically, I grew up lived in a rural area and went into cities very rarely. I think in the 90s zeros there were Simpsons promotions that linked with 7/11, so I thought they were only a chain in the show. Van Gogh cutting off his ear. I thought that was an urban legend like George Washington chopping down the cherry tree before I saw it at Eternity's Gate at age 41. Even then, I was skeptical until I read it was true in the reviews. There are some theories that it was actually Gauguin who cut it off with a sword during an argument or while drunk and roughhousing, but Van Gogh lied and said he cut it off himself so Gauguin would not be arrested. I grew up in Los Angeles, so I went to Disneyland once or twice a year throughout my childhood. When I visited the East Coast for the first time, I discovered that fireflies are real. I was shocked. I thought they were some magical insect that Walt Disney dreamed up, as he had fake ones twinkling in the trees in Disneyland. I also grew up near Disneyland and I thought everyone had a Disneyland just down the freeway from their home. Pittsburgh. My dad would say it and I'd laugh my butt off thinking of a town named after armpits. I always thought it was a fake place. It's Pittsburgh, and yes, they're very real. Bounty hunters. I thought they were made up for Star Wars and Cowboy Bebop. Only just learned today that they actually exist. Heck man, I've known that bounty hunters existed for about a year now, but I just can't wrap my head around the idea of some Arizona Ranger vigilante looking butt driving around the country to arrest people who haven't paid their taxes. People with bad intentions. In my 6-year-old mind I always thought that TV shows were just dramatizing stuff with all their antagonists and whatnot, and that these antagonists didn't exist in our world. Maybe it's because I was surrounded by kind, down-to-earth people. It changed pretty quick as I got older though. I was 100% certain that the joke "why did the chicken cross the road" had a different ending than "to get to the other side BC." I couldn't understand how it was funny. I always thought that the joke was that the person being asked was gonna assume a crazy answer and the "get to the other side" answer was meant to catch them off guard with how simple it is. The streets always being wet at night time in movies. Being from AZ, I always thought that was bulls. I used to think, why are the streets always wet like it had just rained in movies? Streets are always dry as frick at night. Then I went on a trip to MO when I was older and the streets were wet there at night and I was thinking, wow, just like in the movies. During recent weather, I said something about wondering what people would do if it actually snowed since they can't even drive in the rain. My 6-year-old thought snow didn't actually exist. My boyfriend from UK thought polygraphs were fake until I, from USA, mentioned that our police use them in criminal investigations. He literally was like, lie detector tests are real, and it's legal. That was the day I learned that they are mainly only used in the US, and their results are not admissible in court. That the Bible was written in other languages. When I was younger I thought the Bible was written in English because everyone in the world speaks English. When my Sunday school teacher told us that it was originally written in several languages ranging from Greek to Hebrew to Aramaic, it blew my mind and I thought she was making it up. No part of the Bible was written in Latin, though, so I'd swap that out for Hebrew in your list. Platypuses. They just looked way too mishmashed together to be a natural thing. But baby platypuses platypodes are the cutest things ever. When they first sent platypus remains back to Europe from Australia, European zoologists thought it was a mishmashed hoax too. I didn't know Bohemian Rhapsody was a real song until I was about 12. I would always hear my dad singing it and just thought it was just nonsense words that he'd made up, and never questioned it. In your defense, the band has said that they came up with the music first and had to make up lyrics that fit. My dad played songs like Chattanooga Choo Choo and I've Got a Gal in Kalamazoo. I thought Chattanooga and Kalamazoo were made up places. I live near Kalamazoo. Can confirm it's not real. The entire state of Texas. Since Sandy was from there on SpongeBob, younger me assumed it couldn't be real because cartoon equals fake. It took me until I was about 8 and a kid transferred from our school from Dallas. I thought he was lying when he said he was from Texas and secretly laughed at him for trying to impress the class with lies. I promise I'm smarter now. When we were little, my mom would sometimes sing Hooked on a Feeling by Blue Suede and we all thought she made it up, because she mostly sang the chanting part at the beginning. Me and my siblings were amazed when Guardians of the Galaxy came out and we heard the soundtrack and realized it was real. LMAO, it's amazing when stuff like that happens. My mom sings songs all of the time and I hear them and I'm like, whoa. Costakers. I saw one in Thunderbirds, kids sci-fi show if you're not familiar, and thought it was a made-up futuristic concept like everything else in the show. Instead of searching a multi-story car park for a space, as I had always seen in real life, the character left his car at the entrance where a machine scooped it up and lifted it up through the huge structure and placed it on a vacant shelf. To me, aged about 12, I thought this was clever but fantastical thinking by the show's designers. Turns out similar systems have existed since the 1960s, just not in my city. Axolotls, tumbleweeds, and cloudberries. I found out about the tumbleweeds and axolotls on the same day and got real scared about jackalopes, but it turns out they are actually fake, so I was only 2/3 a moron. Parents who love their children thought it was just on TV and that all my friends' parents were just pretending to be happy because I was a guest in their house, and would drop the act as soon as I left. I get that it's real now, but it's still unnerving and uncomfortable to talk to my coworkers with kids, grandkids, and hear them say how much they love them, missed them when they grew up and moved out, that they talk all the time, can't wait to see them for the holidays, etc. Not me, but my younger sister thought the CDC was a fictional organization. She had watched an episode where the characters from The Walking Dead had to take refuge in one of their headquarters, I think. When I mentioned the CDC again years later in one of our conversations, she was like, you know that's not a real thing, right? I had the opposite. I thought jackalopes, the rabbit with antlers, were real until I was 19 years old. I just thought they were native to New Mexico, Arizona or something. They seemed like such a real animal. Who thought a cool mythical animal to create is a rabbit with antlers? You have total freedom to make up whatever you want and you choose that? I was today years old when I leaned jackalopes aren't real. Shakey's Pizza. I always saw it in movies and assumed it was like the 555 number thing. That is until I was 25 and drove past one with my now wife and was like, what the frick, they're real. I then had to explain that I always thought they were just in movies while she stared at me like I was an idiot. I mean, I've never seen one in the wild. Meanwhile, a local grocery chain, Fred Meyer's, doesn't exist outside the Pacific Northwest, so I can only assume there are regional establishments that just sound made up if you see them on TV and they don't exist in your area. The show My Mother the Car. My relatives always talked about it being one of the worst TV shows ever made. However, I thought they were making it up. The description made it hard for me to believe a show this stupid was actually made, until I found an episode on Hulu a couple years ago. I didn't need to watch more than a few minutes of a single episode of the show to conclude that it was indeed both an actual show and one of the worst shows ever made. Naughty pine paneling in our parents' bedroom. They pronounced it naughty pine. My brother and I thought it was fake bedroom paneling, but proved to be real wood. I didn't know that there was an actual bird called the blue-footed booby. I thought it was just an animal like a unicorn or jackalope that were just made up. It wasn't until an episode of Real or Fake on Bill's channel that I figured out it was real. I thought Egypt didn't exist because I had an encyclopedia on ancient Egypt. I took that to mean that Egypt was no longer existent until I was 10 or so, and I brought it up with a teacher. Needless to say, I was incredibly shocked. I gave the encyclopedia as a donation to my nearest surgery if anyone was wondering what happened to it. This is going to be an extremely specific one, but perhaps somebody in the thread will know what I'm talking about. In northwest England back in the 80s 90s there was this huge, bodybuilding black guy who was known as Purple Archie. We used to get told not to play out after dark in case Purple Archie got you, and any huge, scary black man you saw might be Purple Archie and so should be avoided. He was basically the boogeyman. As the years went by, I forgot about it mostly because I moved down south, and it wasn't until decades later and the invention of Facebook that I started seeing pages and videos about, you guessed it, Purple Archie. Turns out he wasn't some mythological creature. There really is an enormous black bodybuilder who walks about in northwestern towns, and he was actually convicted for manslaughter and a number of other crimes related to harassment. Scary bloke. Someone else actually also made a comment here about this guy. I didn't think other countries existed. I mean, I knew there were places called China and Mexico, etc. But I thought every county was in America. This is the most American thing I have heard all Christmas morning. Casseroles. I'm an immigrant to the US, so I mostly ate my own culture's food except for when I got takeout, and I always associated them with weird food from the 70s that didn't exist today. I didn't know people still made them until I got to college and they were served in the dining hall. This is gonna sound weird, but I have a neurological condition called aphantasia, which basically means I can't see images in my mind's eye. I always thought that when people spoke about seeing things in their head it was, pun intended, imagination. It wasn't until 3 months ago that I found out that most people can see images in their head and I'm just the oddball out. A lot of American things. Mount Rushmore. Still not completely convinced. The Lincoln Memorial. I thought this was a joke, playing on the huge statue of Zeus that was in Olympia. Pledging allegiance to the flag, everyone knowing the words to the national anthem, in English. Most people I know don't know all the words. Guns allowed in public, like supermarkets, etc. I thought that was just for movies. In New Orleans, Halloween night, with English mate, fricked up, in a bar. He got a bit cocky around a fat American dressed as a cowboy and started fricking with his toy gun. Tried to take it out if the man's dress up holster. Yep, wasn't a costume. Oops, ha. Phone numbers with letters in them. Like, on TV you'd see those. Call 800 car 123 or something. I always thought they looked like that so you would know they were fake and wouldn't actually try to call them. But seem like they're an American thing. LOL. The letters aren't in the actual phone numbers. Numbers are replaced with letters to make the phone number catchy and easier to remember. Racism. I grew up in Maine, where we have a 1.8% minority rate. We had a black kid in high school and I never saw any open racism towards the kid. And, to an 18-year-old from rural Maine, if I didn't experience or see it, it probably wasn't real. I went to college, grew up, married, kids of my own. And I'm friends with a few people who are minorities and I've asked them outright if they've ever experienced racism. Much to my surprise, racism is very much alive. And now that I'm older, I've realized that of course a middle-class white dude from rural Maine would never have witnessed it. But holy crap, have a couple black friends over to your place and you'll become very aware of who the racists in your town are. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.